Join me as I take on the challenge of buying lunch for a homeless man and see if I can turn that small act of kindness into something life-changing. In the busy streets of a large city, 15-year-old Derek Lewis walked home from school, his backpack filled with books and excellent test papers. Despite his sharp mind and top grades, worry lines creased his young face. He lived with his mother, Martha Lewis, in a small apartment in Greenwood, one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. Their apartment building stood tired and worn, its paint peeling from years of neglect. The stairs creaked under Derek's feet as he climbed to the third floor. Through the thin walls, he could hear neighbors' TVs and conversations, a constant reminder of how close everyone lived in this part of town. Martha Lewis worked long hours at the local grocery store, her salary barely covering their basic needs. Each month, she would sit at their small kitchen table, carefully counting bills and trying to make ends meet. Derek watched her shoulders slump with worry, though she always tried to hide it with a brave smile. At school, Derek's teachers praised his intelligence and dedication. His test scores were among the highest in class, and he never missed an assignment. But while other students talked about college plans and future careers, Derek quietly wondered if he could afford to dream that big. The stack of unpaid bills at home reminded him daily of their financial struggles. Still, every evening, Derek sat at their worn kitchen table, determined to keep studying. His mother's sacrifices pushed him to work harder, to believe that his good grades might someday help them find a better life. Martha worked at Wilson's grocery store, stacking shelves and operating the cash register from early morning until late evening. Her hands were always tired, and her feet ached from standing all day. The small paycheck she brought home barely covered their rent and basic utilities. Sometimes she would skip meals, telling Derek she had already eaten at work, but he knew better. After school, Derek took whatever odd jobs he could find in the neighborhood. He delivered newspapers before sunrise, helped elderly neighbors with their groceries, and sometimes assisted at the local library shelving books. Each dollar he earned went straight into their household fund, but despite their combined efforts, bills continued to pile up on their kitchen table. "Mom, I earned $15 today helping Mr. Chen clean his store," Derek would say, placing the worn bills next to their growing stack of unpaid notices. Martha would smile, her eyes filled with both pride and sadness at seeing her young son working so hard. Every night, Derek lay in his small bed, listening to his mother working on their budget. The soft sound of her calculator and occasional sighs drifted through the thin walls. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on his young shoulders. At 15, he understood more about financial struggles than many adults. His school fees were coming due, and the electricity bill showed an overdue balance. Derek caught himself checking price tags on everything, calculating costs in his head, wondering how they could stretch their limited money further. Sometimes he would catch his mother looking at him with worry in her eyes, and he would straighten his shoulders, trying to appear stronger than he felt. "Everything will be okay, Mom," he would say, though uncertainty gnawed at his stomach. He wanted to believe it himself, wanted to somehow make their situation better. Each morning, he woke up thinking about new ways to earn money, new solutions to their endless financial puzzle. The future loomed ahead like a dark cloud, but Derek was determined to find a way through it, for his mother's sake as much as his own. Despite their own struggles, Martha never failed to help others in need. She would share their leftover food with elderly neighbors or offer a kind word to someone having a bad day at the store. "Kindness costs nothing, Derek," she would say, her tired eyes brightening. Sometimes just a smile can change someone's whole day. Every evening after dinner, Martha would tell Derek stories about random acts of kindness she witnessed at work. Today, a customer paid for a mother's groceries when her card was declined. She'd share, her voice full of hope. "See, Derek, there's still so much good in this world, even when times are tough." These lessons stayed with Derek, but they also made him question his own future. Sitting at his desk late at night, he would stare at his textbooks, torn between two paths. His grades were excellent, and teachers often spoke about college possibilities. But the thought of college expenses made his stomach twist with anxiety. "Maybe I should quit school and work full-time," he whispered to himself one night, looking at the stack of bills on the kitchen table. The idea of leaving school hurt, but watching his mother work so hard hurt even more. Still, he remembered her words about the importance of education, how she believed it was his ticket to a better life. The conflict weighed heavily on his young shoulders as he tried to balance being a good student with being a good son. Every night, Derek would watch his mother return from work, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion, but her smile never fading. She would still find energy to ask about his day and help with his homework. The sight of her worn hands and tired eyes made his heart ache. He noticed how she always chose the cheapest items at the grocery store, how she patched her old clothes instead of buying new ones, saving every penny for his education. "You should rest, Mom," he would say, gently taking the dishes from her hands. "I'll clean up tonight." Martha would kiss his forehead, her eyes glistening with pride and love. These small moments reminded Derek of everything his mother sacrificed for him, fueling his determination to somehow make their lives better. In his small bedroom, lying awake at night, Derek would stare at the ceiling, his mind racing with possibilities. He thought about different jobs he could take, scholarships he could apply for, anything that might help ease their financial burden. The solutions seemed distant, like stars he couldn't quite reach. Sometimes the weight of their problems felt too heavy for his young shoulders. Yet his mother's teachings about kindness kept him hopeful. She always said that good deeds had a way of coming back to help you when you least expected it. "The world has a way of balancing things," she would tell him. "Keep being kind, Derek, and one day things will get better." These words echoed in his mind during difficult times. Despite their struggles, Derek held on to this belief. He remembered how his mother once helped a neighbor with groceries, and later that same neighbor offered him a small job. These small connections of kindness gave him hope. Maybe tomorrow would bring the chance they needed, or perhaps the day after. Until then, he would keep working hard, keep being kind, and keep believing that somehow their kindness would light the way to a better future. Through the fading afternoon light, Derek walked his usual route home past Riverside Park. The autumn wind rustled through the trees, scattering brown leaves across the cracked sidewalk. He pulled his thin jacket closer, thinking about the homework waiting at home and wondering what his mother would make for dinner with their limited groceries. That's when he saw him, an elderly man sitting alone on a park bench. The man's clothes were worn and dirty, his gray beard unkempt. Derek noticed how his shoulders hunched against the cold and how his hands trembled slightly as they gripped the edge of the bench. Something about his presence made Derek slow his steps. The man's eyes were distant and clouded with exhaustion, staring at nothing in particular. His face was pale, almost gray, and his cheeks were hollow, as if he hadn't eaten in days. As Derek watched, the man swayed slightly on the bench, steadying himself with one hand. He looked like he might faint at any moment. In that brief moment of observation, Derek felt a strange connection to this stranger. He recognized the look of someone struggling to hold on, having seen that same expression in his mother's eyes on their hardest days. The man's name tag was still pinned to his tattered jacket. Victor Anderson, perhaps from a job he once held, now just a reminder of better days. The sight of Victor made Derek pause in his tracks. The man's obvious suffering stirred something in his heart despite his own family struggles. He stood there witnessing Victor's quiet desperation and felt the weight of a decision forming in his mind. Derek stood near the bench, watching the man more closely. There was something in Victor's eyes that reminded him of the stories his mother told about people who had lost everything. The deep sadness, The quiet desperation. It was all too familiar. Those eyes held the same pain Derek sometimes saw in the mirror when thinking about his family's struggles. His hand moved to his pocket, feeling the small bundle of money he'd saved from his part-time jobs. $20. Not much, but it was meant for a new pair of school shoes. His current ones were falling apart, the soles worn thin and his toes almost poking through. He'd been saving for weeks, carefully putting aside each dollar earned from delivering newspapers and helping neighbors. The internal struggle played across his young face. Part of him wanted to walk past, to protect his small savings and focus on his own needs. His old shoes wouldn't last much longer, and the school year had barely begun. Yet he couldn't stop thinking about his mother's words about kindness, about helping others even when you had little yourself. Maybe I could just buy him some food, Derek thought, his fingers still touching the money in his pocket. The shoes can wait a little longer. But even as he considered this, he wondered if he was being foolish. His family could barely afford their own needs. Should he really be giving away his savings? The man swayed again on the bench, and Derek's heart tightened with concern. His feet remained rooted to the spot as his mind wrestled with the decision. The practical voice in his head reminded him about his worn-out shoes, while his heart pulled him toward the struggling man on the bench. Each moment of hesitation felt heavy with the weight of choice. Derek pulled out the $20, staring at the crumpled bills in his palm. The money represented weeks of early morning newspaper deliveries and afternoons helping neighbors with yard work. He'd imagined these dollars turning into new shoes, replacing his current pair with their holes and worn soles. But now, looking at Victor's trembling hands and pale face, those shoes suddenly seemed less important. If I buy him food, I'll have to start saving all over again, Derek thought, his heart racing with conflict. His feet shifted in his old shoes, reminding him of their worn condition. The practical side of him argued that he needed those shoes for school, that his mother would want him to take care of himself first. Then his mother's voice echoed in his memory, clear and gentle. Kindness always finds its way back to you, Derek. Sometimes when you least expect it. He remembered how she'd shared their dinner with a neighbor last week, even though their own pantry was nearly empty. Her words about kindness had always stuck with him, shaping his view of the world. Looking at Victor again, Derek made his decision. A pair of shoes could wait, but hunger couldn't. He thought about how it would feel to sit alone, exhausted and hungry, while people walked past pretending not to see. His own cramped apartment and tight budget suddenly seemed like luxury compared to having nothing at all. The shoes aren't as important as helping someone who might not have eaten today, he whispered to himself, clutching the money with newfound determination. His mother had taught him that some choices in life weren't about logic or practicality. They were about being human, about helping others, even when it meant sacrificing something you needed yourself. Taking a deep breath, Derek approached the bench. His heart pounded, but his voice remained steady as he spoke. "Excuse me, sir. Would you like to get something to eat? There's a quick bite just around the corner." He gestured toward the small restaurant with its flickering neon sign. Victor looked up, surprise flickering across his tired face. For a moment, he seemed unsure how to respond, as if kindness from strangers was something he'd forgotten existed. His eyes met Derek's, and there was a glimmer of something. Gratitude, perhaps, or hope. "You're very kind, young man," Victor said softly, his voice hoarse. "But are you sure?" He looked at Derek's worn clothes, clearly wondering if this boy could afford to help others. "I'm sure," Derek replied, feeling a warm glow of certainty despite giving up his shoe money. Everyone needs a good meal sometimes. He helped Victor stand, noticing how the man's hands trembled less as they walked toward Quick Bite. Inside the small restaurant, the warmth and smell of food made Victor's face brighten slightly. As they sat at a corner table, Derek felt an unexpected connection with this stranger. There was something about sharing a meal with someone in need that made his own problems feel lighter. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, but in that moment, Derek felt he'd made the right choice, even as his old shoes pinched his feet under the table. As they ate their simple meals, Victor slowly began to share his story. His hands wrapped around the warm coffee cup, his eyes distant as if looking into the past. "You know, I wasn't always like this," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Once, I had everything. A mansion in the city's best neighborhood, luxury cars, expensive suits." Derek paused mid-bite, surprised by this revelation. He watched as Victor continued, describing a life that seemed worlds away from the tired man sitting across from him. "I was a millionaire by 40, Victor said, a sad smile crossing his face. "Built a technology company from nothing. Had hundreds of employees, offices in 3 cities. Then Victor's voice grew heavier as he described his fall. Bad investments, trusting the wrong people, making hasty decisions that cost him everything. Pride comes before the fall, they say, he murmured, stirring his coffee absently. "I lost it all in less than a year. The company, the house, my family's trust." Derek listened intently, his own meal forgotten. He saw the pain in Victor's eyes, recognized the weight of regret in his words. It struck him how quickly life could change, how someone could go from having everything to sitting alone in a park. The story made him think of his own mother's struggles, how she always said that life was unpredictable, but kindness remained constant. "I don't blame anyone but myself," Victor said softly, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. His fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup thoughtfully. "Every choice I made, every mistake, they were all mine. The hardest part isn't losing the money. It's living with the knowledge that I could have done things differently." He paused, looking out the restaurant window at the passing people. "Living on the streets, it's not easy. The cold, the hunger, the way people look through you as if you're invisible." His voice trembled slightly, but then strengthened. "But it teaches you what really matters. When you lose everything, you learn the true value of a simple meal, a kind word, a moment of human connection." Derek felt his throat tighten with emotion. He thought about his own family struggles, how they counted every dollar, yet they still had a roof over their heads and each other. Victor's words made their small apartment feel like a palace. "What about you, young man?" Victor asked gently, turning his attention to Derek. "Tell me about your life." His eyes were kind, interested, showing genuine care that made Derek feel comfortable opening up. "I live with my mom," Derek began hesitantly. "We don't have much, but she works really hard at the grocery store. Sometimes it's tough making ends meet, but we manage somehow." "Mom works long shifts at the store," Derek continued, his voice soft with emotion. "Sometimes she's so tired she falls asleep at the kitchen table, still counting bills." He told Victor about the unpaid school fees, the worn-out shoes, and how his mother would skip meals to make sure he had enough to eat. "But she never complains. She just keeps telling me to study hard and be kind to others." Suddenly, Victor's demeanor changed. He sat up straighter, and a different kind of light came into his eyes. "Derek," he said, his voice becoming clearer and stronger, "I need to tell you something." He placed his coffee cup down carefully. "I haven't been entirely honest with you. The truth is, I'm not homeless. I'm still a millionaire." Victor's words hung in the air between them. The story about losing everything was true. It happened years ago. But I managed to rebuild my life, recover my fortune. Now, I sometimes dress as a homeless person to test people's kindness, to find those who help others even when they have little themselves. Derek sat frozen, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. The restaurant's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as his mind struggled to process this revelation. He looked at Victor's ragged clothes, then back at his face, which now held a completely different expression, one of clarity and purpose rather than desperation. The transformation was so complete that Derek wondered how he hadn't noticed it before. "I've been doing this social experiment for months," Victor explained, his voice gentle but firm. "I sit in different parts of the city, watching how people react to those in need. Hundreds have walked past me. Some gave spare change. Others offered quick words of sympathy. But you," he paused, looking at Derek with warmth in his eyes. "You were willing to give up something you truly needed to help a stranger." Victor's words hung in the small space between them. "You gave your shoe money without hesitation, even though you clearly needed those shoes yourself." He glanced down at Derek's worn footwear. That kind of genuine kindness is rare, especially from someone so young who has their own struggles. The restaurant's overhead lights cast a soft glow as Victor reached into his tattered coat. "I want to help you, Derek," he said quietly. "Your kindness today showed me the kind of person you are." His weathered hands emerged with a thick envelope, which he placed carefully on the table between them. The white envelope seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights, stark against the scratched surface of the formica table. Derek stared at it, his heart beginning to race. The sounds of the restaurant, clinking dishes, murmured conversations, the sizzle of the grill, seemed to fade away as he focused on that simple envelope and what it might contain. Derek stared at the envelope on the table, his fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over it. A mix of confusion and curiosity swirled in his mind. The envelope seemed out of place in this simple fast food restaurant, like something from another world entirely. "This is for you," Victor said softly, pushing the envelope closer. "A gift that I hope will change your life. Your kindness today proved that you deserve a real chance to make things better for yourself and your mother." His eyes were kind but serious, watching Derek's reaction carefully. With unsteady hands, Derek opened the envelope. Inside was a check, and when he saw the amount, his breath caught in his throat. $15,000. The number seemed to dance before his eyes. He blinked several times, certain he must be misreading it. That amount was more money than he and his mother made in a year. The restaurant continued its usual bustle around them, but Derek felt frozen in time. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The check in his hands represented so many things: new shoes, paid bills, his mother's worry lines disappearing, maybe even college someday. It felt impossible, like a dream he might wake from at any moment. I don't," he finally managed to stammer, his voice barely a whisper. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed quietly as tears began to well in his eyes. All he'd done was buy a meal for someone he thought needed help, and now his entire world had shifted on its axis. With trembling hands, Derek clutched the envelope as he rushed up the creaky stairs to their apartment. His heart pounded against his chest, still unable to believe what had happened. He found his mother at their small kitchen table, her shoulders slumped from another long day at work. "Mom," he called softly, his voice shaking with emotion. "Something incredible happened today." Martha looked up, concern crossing her tired face as Derek pulled out the check and began telling her about Victor and their encounter at Quick Bite. $15,000, Martha whispered in disbelief, her hands trembling as she held the check. "This can't be real, Derek." She examined the check carefully, checking every detail, her eyes growing wider. "But it is real," she said finally, tears welling in her eyes. "It's really real." Derek sat beside her, his own eyes filling with tears. "I just wanted to help him, Mom. I never expected." His voice trailed off as his mother pulled him into a tight hug. They sat there for a moment, both overwhelmed by the magnitude of this gift. "We can pay the rent," Derek said softly, pulling back to look at his mother's face. "And my school fees." He reached for the stack of bills on the table, the ones that had kept his mother awake at night. "We can pay all of these, Mom. You won't have to worry anymore." Martha nodded, still unable to speak as she watched her son sort through the bills they could finally settle. Their tiny apartment, which had felt so heavy with financial burden just hours ago, now seemed filled with hope. The next morning, Derek woke up feeling different. The constant knot of worry in his stomach had loosened. He looked around his small room, and for the first time in years, he didn't immediately think about unpaid bills or upcoming expenses. Sitting at the kitchen table, clutching his morning coffee, Derek realized this gift was more than just money. It was a chance to change everything, their lives, their future. His mind raced with possibilities he'd never dared to consider before. "I want to help others too, Mom," he said quietly, pushing a portion of the money across the table. "Maybe we could donate this to the homeless shelter downtown." Martha smiled warmly, pride shining in her eyes as she nodded. Together, they set aside $2,000 for Hope Fund, remembering how a single act of kindness had transformed their own lives. Walking to school that day, Derek felt lighter, yet somehow more focused. The shelter downtown reminded him of Victor, of how appearances could be deceiving, and how helping others could change lives. He understood now that this gift wasn't just about fixing their problems. It was about spreading hope to others too. In class, Derek paid attention with renewed energy. His notes were neater, his hands shooting up more often to answer questions. Without the constant shadow of financial worry, his mind felt clearer, more capable. He stayed after school to help younger students with their homework, remembering how it felt to need help and receive it unexpectedly. Without the constant weight of financial stress, Derek found himself fully engaged in his classes. His raised hand became a familiar sight in every lesson, and his test scores climbed even higher. His teachers noticed the change, not just in his grades, but in his confidence. During lunch breaks, Derek started a study group for students struggling with math and science. "I know how it feels to face challenges," he told them, remembering his own difficult times. The smile on Sarah's face when she finally understood algebra, or Mike's excitement over mastering chemistry equations, made his heart warm. After school, he dedicated 2 afternoons each week to volunteering at the local community center. He helped younger kids with their homework, organized food drives, and participated in neighborhood cleanup projects. Each time he helped someone, he thought of Victor and how one act of kindness could create ripples of change. "You've really made a difference here," his principal told him one morning, handing him information about college scholarships. Derek accepted the papers with trembling hands, remembering how impossible college had seemed just months ago. That afternoon, he sat at his desk, carefully filling out scholarship applications, his mother's proud smile encouraging him as she watched from the doorway. "Maybe I can help more people if I get a good education," he told his mother that evening. She nodded, tears of joy in her eyes, as they worked together on his college essays. Each word he wrote reflected not just his achievements, but the valuable lesson he'd learned about how helping others could transform lives, including his own. The peace of financial security brought new energy to Derek's studies. At his desk each evening, without the constant worry about bills hanging over him, he found himself absorbing knowledge more easily, dreaming bigger dreams. His notebooks filled with neat handwriting and detailed notes, each page representing his growing confidence. "Money helps, but it's not everything," he told his study group one afternoon. "What really matters is how hard you work and how much you want to succeed." He shared his story with them, about Victor, about kindness, and about how helping others had changed his own life. His friends listened intently, their eyes widening as he described that fateful day at Quick Bite. Every weekend now, Derek volunteered at Hope Fund's soup kitchen. He served meals, sorted donated clothes, and talked with people who reminded him of Victor that day in the park. "Everyone has a story," he would say, ladling hot soup into bowls. Sometimes people just need someone to listen, to care. During a community outreach project, Derek helped organize a winter coat drive for homeless seniors. As he handed out warm coats, he remembered his own days of counting pennies, of wondering how to help others when he had so little himself. Now, watching grateful smiles spread across tired faces, He felt a warmth in his heart that no amount of money could buy. "It feels different when you're on the giving side," he told his mother one evening while sorting donations. His eyes shone with joy as he described how a small act of kindness could light up someone's entire day. In these moments, he understood that the real gift wasn't just the money. It was the ability to make a difference in other people's lives. Late one evening, as Derek helped organize a community food drive, he watched families receive their groceries with grateful smiles. Each thank you reminded him of his own journey, how one person's kindness had rippled out to touch so many others. His mother's words about kindness returning had proven true in ways he never imagined. "We all have a responsibility to help each other," he told a group of younger students during a mentoring session. His voice carried the weight of experience as he shared stories about his past struggles. "Every difficulty we overcome can become strength to lift others up." The students listened intently, seeing in him the kind of person they hoped to become. Walking through his old neighborhood, Derek would sometimes pause at spots that held memories of harder times. The corner where he'd counted coins for dinner, the store where he'd longingly eyed new shoes. These memories no longer brought pain. Instead, they fueled his determination to help others facing similar challenges. "It's amazing how believing in kindness can change everything," he told his mother one night while helping her prepare care packages for neighbors. "Victor's gift wasn't just the money. It was showing me that good things happen when you help others." His mother squeezed his hand, pride shining in her eyes. The local newspaper ran a story about Derek's community work, calling him an inspiration to youth. But for Derek, the real reward was seeing others begin to help too. His classmates started volunteering, neighbors shared what they could, and slowly, their community grew stronger. He had become living proof that one act of kindness could transform not just a life, but an entire neighborhood. 6 months after their first meeting, Derek sat in Bean's corner, sipping hot chocolate while reviewing his college applications. The bell above the door chimed, and he looked up to see a familiar face. Victor Anderson, now dressed in a crisp business suit, his gray hair neatly trimmed. "Derek." Victor's warm voice carried across the quiet cafe. He walked over, a gentle smile lighting up his face. The tired, desperate man from the park had transformed into a confident businessman, his eyes bright with success. He gestured to the empty chair. "May I join you?" Derek nodded, noticing how Victor carried himself with quiet dignity. A newspaper tucked under his arm showed his company's latest success, a new technology venture that was changing lives. Yet his eyes still held the same kindness Derek remembered from that day at Quick Bite. "You've done remarkable things, Derek," Victor said softly, settling into the chair. "I've heard about your work at the shelter, the tutoring program you started." His voice filled with pride as he continued, "You didn't just help yourself. You're helping others find their way too. That's exactly what I hoped would happen." "You've taken that gift and multiplied its impact," Victor said warmly, placing his coffee cup down. "Not just helping your family, but lifting up your entire community. That's something special, Derek." His eyes sparkled with an idea as he reached for his briefcase. "I have a proposition for you," Victor continued, pulling out a sleek folder with the Hope Fund logo. "We're starting a new program for elderly homeless individuals. It's not just about providing shelter or food. We want to help them rebuild their lives, find purpose again." He spread several photographs across the table showing older people learning new skills, working in gardens, and sharing meals together. "Our organization needs young people like you, Derek. People who understand that real change comes from both support and guidance." Victor's voice grew passionate as he explained how the program would work, teaching life skills, providing counseling, helping with job placement. Each word painted a picture of hope and transformation. Derek leaned forward, his heart beating faster as he looked at the program details. This was bigger than anything he'd imagined. A chance to help people like the man he thought Victor was that day in the park. His mind raced with possibilities, questions forming on his lips, about how he could be part of this mission. "We need people with heart, Derek," Victor explained, his eyes serious but kind. "People who understand that kindness isn't just about giving money. It's about giving time, understanding, and genuine care. People like you." He smiled warmly, remembering the young boy who'd given up his shoe money to help a stranger. "This work isn't easy," he continued, spreading out more documents on the table. "It means long hours, emotional investment, and real dedication. Sometimes progress is slow and there are many challenges, but the rewards—" He paused, touching a photo of an elderly man proudly holding up a job certificate. "The rewards are beyond measure." Victor leaned forward, his voice gentle but filled with conviction. "Derek, you've already proven what you can do with an opportunity. Think about how many lives you could touch, how many people you could inspire to change their own stories." He gestured to the busy street outside. "Just like you changed yours, you could help others find their way too. That's what Hope Fund is all about, creating ripples of positive change." Derek sat quietly for a moment, taking it all in. Here was a chance to do more than he'd ever dreamed possible, to turn his small acts of kindness into something bigger. His heart raced with excitement as he imagined the possibilities ahead. "I want to learn everything," he said finally, his voice filled with determination. "About helping people, about making real changes in their lives." His fingers traced the edge of a program brochure, mind already filling with ideas about how he could contribute. This wasn't just another opportunity. It was a chance to grow, to become someone who could make a lasting difference. Looking at Victor across the table, Derek felt overwhelmed with gratitude and purpose. To be chosen for something this important, to be trusted with others' hopes and dreams, it felt both daunting and incredibly right. "Thank you for believing in me," he said softly, his voice steady with newfound confidence. "I won't let you down." The next few weeks flew by as Derek immersed himself in Hope Fund's training programs. Each day brought new insights into how he could expand his impact, reaching more people who needed help. The small acts of kindness he'd practiced before now grew into something larger, more structured, but just as heartfelt. During leadership workshops, Derek absorbed everything, from organizing community programs to understanding the complex needs of elderly homeless individuals. He took careful notes, asked thoughtful questions, and stayed late to practice new skills. The other volunteers smiled at his enthusiasm, recognizing in him the same passion that had brought them to Hope Fund. Soon, Derek began working directly with elderly homeless clients. He sat with Mr. James, helping him fill out job applications, and spent afternoons teaching Mrs. Thompson how to use a computer. Each small victory, a smile, a thank you, a small step forward, reminded him of his own journey and filled him with quiet joy. This was more than just helping. It was being part of someone else's transformation story. Every day at Hope Fund taught Derek something new about helping others stand on their own feet. He learned that true help meant more than just giving. It meant teaching independence. With gentle patience, he showed elderly residents how to create resumes, manage small budgets, and connect with support services. Each small step forward filled him with quiet satisfaction. "The best feeling," he told his mother one evening, "is watching someone realize they can do things on their own." His voice softened as he described how Mr. Parker had just landed his first job in years, or how Mrs. Wilson had finally found permanent housing. These victories, big and small, were changing him too. He felt more mature, more understanding of life's complexities, and more capable of making real change happen. In his journal that night, Derek wrote about his hopes for the future. His own life had transformed dramatically since that day in the park, but now he saw that as just the beginning. Every person he helped at Hope Fund was like dropping another stone in a pond, creating ripples of positive change that spread through the community. "This is my purpose," he wrote, "not just to climb higher myself, but to help others find their way up too." Derek started his work at Hope Fund, spending his afternoons with elderly homeless individuals. Each day brought new challenges as he learned to understand their unique stories and struggles. Some had lost everything late in life, while others had been on the streets for years. The work tested his patience, but Derek approached each person with genuine care and attention. At first, he found it difficult to connect with some of the older residents. They were often skeptical of help, hardened by years of disappointment. Derek learned to listen more than speak, to observe their needs rather than assume. He knew what was best. When an elderly man struggled to fill out a form, Derek sat quietly beside him, offering help only when asked. When a woman seemed overwhelmed by technology, he broke down instructions into simple steps. Day by day, Derek discovered that leadership wasn't about giving orders, but about understanding people. He saw how a gentle word could lift someone's spirits, how a moment of patience could build trust. Though the work challenged him, he felt himself growing stronger, more confident. Each small victory, each grateful smile, reminded him that this was more than just a job. It was a chance to become someone better. This response matches the key points while maintaining simple language, short sentences, and a gentle tone that shows Derek's growth through his work with the elderly homeless. Among all the people Derek helped, Mr. Henry proved to be his greatest challenge. The elderly man sat alone in the corner each day, his face set in a permanent frown. When Derek approached with suggestions or offers of help, Mr. Henry would wave him away with sharp words. "Leave me alone, boy. I don't need your pity," he would say, turning his back. Day after day, Derek tried to reach out, but Mr. Henry remained distant and difficult. He refused to join group activities or accept guidance about job opportunities. Each rejection made Derek's heart sink a little lower. Sometimes he wondered if he should give up and focus on others who wanted help. Then one evening, as Derek walked home feeling discouraged, he remembered his mother's words. "Patience and kindness can soften the hardest hearts, baby. Don't give up on people who push you away. Sometimes they're the ones who need help the most." Taking a deep breath, Derek decided to keep trying with Mr. Henry. He knew that beneath the man's harsh exterior lay someone who needed help, even if he wouldn't admit it. The next day, Derek tried a different approach with Mr. Henry. Instead of offering direct help, he simply sat nearby with a laptop, typing slowly. Mr. Henry watched from the corner of his eye, his curiosity slowly overcoming his stubbornness. "What are you doing?" he finally asked. Derek smiled and explained he was looking for job listings. "Would you like to see how it works?" he asked gently. To his surprise, Mr. Henry nodded. Each day after that, they spent a little time together at the computer. Derek taught him basic skills: how to use the mouse, how to search the internet, how to write simple emails. Mr. Henry's hands shook at first, but his determination grew stronger. Slowly, his frown began to soften. Some days, he even smiled. Watching Mr. Henry's transformation filled Derek with quiet pride. The man who once pushed everyone away now helped other elderly residents with their computer questions. Derek realized that teaching Mr. Henry had taught him something too, about patience, persistence, and the power of small, daily kindnesses. He understood now that helping others wasn't just about changing their lives. It was about growing stronger and wiser yourself. As time passed, Derek found himself taking on more responsibilities at Hope Fund. He learned to coordinate with other volunteers, organizing small group activities for the elderly residents. When someone had a new idea, Derek listened carefully and helped turn those ideas into action. He discovered that being a good leader meant bringing out the best in others. Other volunteers began coming to him for advice. "How do you get through to the difficult ones?" they would ask. Derek shared his experiences openly, especially the lessons he learned from working with Mr. Henry. He showed them how patience and understanding could work better than pushing too hard. Soon, even the program coordinators noticed his natural ability to guide others. Something changed inside Derek, too. The shy teenager who once doubted himself now saw the world differently. Each person he helped showed him new ways of looking at life. When he walked through the center now, he didn't just see homeless people needing help. He saw teachers who shared their wisdom, fighters who never gave up, and friends who supported each other. His world had grown larger, richer, and more meaningful than he ever expected. Each evening when Derek headed home from Hope Fund, he felt different than the day before. The boy who first walked through those doors months ago was changing. He noticed it in small ways, in how he handled problems more calmly now, in how he thought about others' needs before speaking, in how he found solutions instead of seeing obstacles. Working with the homeless residents taught him lessons no classroom could provide. He learned to look past first impressions and find the strength in every person. When someone struggled, Derek knew now that rushing wasn't the answer. Sometimes people just needed someone to sit quietly with them, to show them they weren't alone. His mother noticed the change too, often saying how proud she was of the young man he was becoming. At night, before falling asleep, Derek would think about the small victories he witnessed each day. A resident finding a job, Mr. Henry mastering email, or someone finally getting their own apartment. These moments filled his heart with quiet joy. He realized that true happiness came not just from solving his own problems, but from helping others overcome theirs. Each smile he helped create, each life he helped create, each life he helped improve, made his own life richer and more meaningful. Spring arrived, marking 1 year since Derek began working at Hope Fund. At a small ceremony in the center's main room, the director handed him a special certificate of recognition. As Derek held the framed paper, he remembered his first day, unsure and nervous. Now he stood tall, surrounded by the residents and volunteers who had become like family. Looking at his mother's proud face in the audience, Derek felt tears form in his eyes. He thought about how far they had come from those difficult days when bills piled up and hope seemed distant. The stranger's gift had done more than just solve their money problems. It had opened a door to something much more valuable, a chance for Derek to discover who he truly was. That evening, sitting in their small kitchen, Derek touched the certificate gently. He thought about the man who had given him the gift that changed everything. The money had helped his family. Yes, but the real gift was the path it led him down. Through helping others, Derek had found his own strength, his own purpose. He had learned that one act of kindness could grow into something much bigger, touching many lives in ways he never imagined possible. Mr. Henry no longer spent his days in the corner of Hope Fund. Instead, he now worked at a local library, helping organize books and assisting with their computer system. His small apartment near the library was modest but comfortable. Sometimes he would stop by the center, not for help anymore, but to share his success story with others. His eyes, once filled with anger, now sparkled with purpose. One afternoon, Mr. Henry pulled Derek aside. "You know, son," he said softly, "I was ready to give up before you came along. Your patience, your kindness, it saved me, showed me I still had something to offer." His words touched Derek deeply. The grumpy old man who once pushed everyone away now stood before him, confident and grateful. Watching Mr. Henry's transformation changed how Derek saw everything. He realized that every person, no matter how difficult or hopeless they seemed, had the potential to change. Life wasn't just about having money or success. It was about connections, about believing in people when they stopped believing in themselves. Through Mr. Henry, Derek learned that sometimes the most beautiful changes start with just one person refusing to give up on another. That evening, walking home from Hope Fund, Derek thought about his journey. The kindness he had shown others had shaped him in unexpected ways. Each person he helped, from Mr. Henry to the newest resident, had taught him something valuable about life. He was no longer just a teenager trying to survive. He had become someone who could make a real difference. In his quiet moments, Derek felt certain about his path now. Helping others wasn't just something he did. It was who he was meant to be. He saw how small acts of kindness could spark huge changes, just like the stranger's gift had changed his own life. The struggles and victories he witnessed at Hope Fund had shown him his true calling. Eric knew this was just the beginning. There were more people to help, more lives to touch, more changes to make. He looked forward to each new day at the center, eager to continue the work that had become his passion. The scared boy who once worried about paying bills had grown into a young man who understood that true wealth came from helping others find their way. Sitting in his room one night, Derek looked at the certificate on his wall and smiled. The money that had once seemed like his greatest blessing now felt small compared to what he had gained. Every grateful smile, every life changed, every lesson learned. These were the real treasures. He thought about how far he had come from being that worried teenager who could barely see past his own problems. At Hope Fund each day, Derek found new ways to inspire others. He shared his story with newcomers, showing them that change was possible. When younger volunteers joined the center, he guided them patiently, just as he had learned to do with Mr. Henry. Each person who found hope through the program added to his sense of purpose. The ripple effect of helping others spread far beyond what he could see. Derek understood now that a meaningful life wasn't built on what you could get, but on what you could give. His own struggles had opened his eyes to the power of community, of people helping people. Whether he was teaching computer skills, offering encouragement, or simply listening to someone's story, he knew he was part of something bigger than himself. This was the real gift, not the money he had received, but the chance to make a difference in the lives of others. As summer approached, Derek found new ways to spread kindness in his community. He started a mentoring program at Hope Fund, connecting younger volunteers with experienced ones. Each small success encouraged him to dream bigger, to reach further. The scared teenager who once worried about buying school supplies had become someone who helped others build their dreams. Standing at the window of Hope Fund one evening, Derek watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. His future stretched before him, filled with possibilities he never imagined before. College applications waited on his desk at home, and the center had offered him a permanent position after graduation. There would be challenges ahead, but he no longer feared them. Each obstacle was just another chance to grow, to help, to make a difference. In that quiet moment, Derek smiled, feeling ready for whatever came next. The stranger's gift had opened a door, but it was Derek's own choices that had transformed him. Tomorrow would bring new faces to help, new problems to solve, new lives to change. And he would be there, just as others had been there for him, ready to show that one person's kindness could light the way for many. His journey wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Thanks for watching, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this incredible story in the comments below. If you're new here, consider subscribing for more uplifting content, and I'll see you in the next video.